My name is Krista, and I started milling my own flour about a year ago. Whenever I started, I could not find any video comparisons really of mills, so I ended up getting the WonderMill, which I have loved. I calculated what I did last year. I started a little micro bakery and I milled about 650 pounds of wheat out of this guy last year, and it didn't fail me once, so I've really enjoyed it. One thing that I noticed is, as I've been talking to people about milling, they want to know where to start, and obviously the mill is a huge investment. I actually started with my Vitamix blender. Having a pastry chef background, I knew when you start investing in equipment, it can get pricey. So I started with the blender just to see how baking with fresh milled flour was before I made the investment. So I started with the WonderMill, and then I have two friends that loaned me their NutriMill Harvest and the Classic. So I wanted to kind of try. I know eventually I'm going to have to get a new mill, but I also have a lot of people asking me the differences between the mills, but I don't know what to tell them because I've never used them. So I've got a few tests that I want to run, some temperature tests, some time tests, and just show you the components of each mill so that if you're looking at investing in one, you might be able to make a better decision. Obviously, the Harvest Mill, the NutriMill Harvest Mill, is a stone mill. So it has the two stones that grind the grains between the stones. So the WonderMill and the NutriMill Classic are both impact mills. So they have the stainless steel burrs that impact the grains and grind them that way. So it's stone mills or impact mills. So these are both 1200 watt motors, and this is a 450 watt motor. These are a little bit louder. Whenever we used a little decibel meter to kind of test them, these two are just slightly louder, but I'll run those here in a minute and you can kind of see the differences as well. Okay, so we've got two dials on this one, and I had to write down some of the instructions for the different millings. So we've got a motor speed and a feed rate. So if you have a low motor speed over here and you turn the feed rate up really high, then you're gonna get the coarsest grind. And then the opposite of that, if you have set your motor to the fastest speed and then the slowest feed rate, then you're gonna have your finest grind. So again, different recipes, you might enjoy a coarser grind, and maybe when you're doing cookies, some different pastries, you might like the finer ground flour. So this does have some different variations. I did grind some, and I've got them laid out side by side, and I'll show you how that looks. I'll go ahead and tell you that the NutriMill Harvest Mill has the widest diversity as far as coarse cracked wheat all the way to a fine flour. So we'll kind of look through those. We also checked the temp on all of them, and the only thing I haven't tested yet is the time. So let's do, I've got a cup of wheat berries here. Okay, so we've gone over the different speeds and the way to adjust the coarseness of the grain milled. Here's our canister. Again, it's pretty big. You've got your little cup here that's gonna catch any excess flour. Just like all the enclosed mills like this, you can use your pastry brush to kind of clean them out. You just wanna make sure and keep everything really dry. You don't ever want moisture in there. Okay, so what we're gonna do, there's one thing, just like my WonderMill I learned, you can have a flour explosion. So there's two lines right here. One says yes and one says no. If it's not all the way in, you will be able to see this first line, which says no. You wanna push it all the way in till it clicks in, and you can see the yes line. So you'll know that it's in there. So if I've got the motor speed high and the feed we're gonna keep as low as possible, which is gonna give us the finest ground. So what I'm gonna do with each mill is I have a cup of flour, or a cup of wheat berries. I'm gonna mill them and time them so we can see how long it takes for each mill to mill 1 cup of wheat berries. So let's see if I can do this. We'll get it turned on. I'm gonna do the finest. Okay, so we were right at 1 minute and 4 seconds on the NutriMill Classic for 1 cup of wheat berries turned to flour. So really quick, I'm gonna pull this out, twist this, and I'm gonna temp that flour. We're at about 96, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, you know, you're going to have the most nutrients in your flour the lower the temperature is. You don't want to overheat your flour while you're milling it. So, you know, 95 degrees is fine. I think the finer I mill my flour, the warmer it's going to get. And so the coarser grinds are going to stay a little bit cooler than that. So this is, again, the finest mill that you can do on the flour. And every time, again, this is not my mill, so I'm not as familiar with which direction to turn that, but you're going to want to empty. This is just any extra flour that it is trying to keep out of the air. You want to dump this into your flour every time you use it so that you're having the same wheat berries in here, and you're not going to mix any other berries together. Okay, so this is very similar to my WonderMill in that it's an enclosed canister like this. I always clean my filter. I actually have a little air compressor and clean that out. You don't want to get it wet because then it's just going to gum up. If you do wash it then with water, then you're going to want to let it dry completely, or you're just going to get that caked up. Some little things that I figured out just in playing with these is this, the rubber seal around the outside. The first few times you are closing and opening this, it's very sticky. So if you get a little bit of flour and rub it around on that seal, it'll help it slide open a little bit better. Again, make sure you push it all the way in, or your flour will not go through this hole, and it causes it to shoot out the sides. For those of you that have milled wheat, you know what a mess that makes. Otherwise, you know, a minute per cup, it's pretty fast. It's staying under 100 degrees temperature. So I think that it's definitely pretty comparable to the WonderMill, just based on my experience. It is bigger than I expected looking at pictures online. So it is 14 inches tall, not including this top part. So again, this is removable, these couple of inches on the top. So to the top of this is about 14 inches tall, and it's 12 inches wide. It'll obviously fit under most countertops, but you know, if you do have a small space, just something to keep in mind. Otherwise, I think it's pretty comparable, and I think it definitely gives you, you know, a good mill on. This is a hard red wheat is what I'm going to use on all of these demos. Okay, the next mill is the WonderMill. This is the mill I ended up buying mostly for the cost and the ability to produce volume. Like I said, I did about 650 pounds of wheat this last year. If I was just milling for my own family at home, you know, I might have chosen a different mill based on that. I knew that I wanted to bake for friends and family. And so I wanted something that could produce volume and be a little bit faster. Again, this is an impact mill, just like the NutriMill Classic. So it has the stainless steel I've had this about a year, and again, I don't feel like I've had any issues with it. It does separate into two separate pieces. It has the cover just like the NutriMill Classic. I don't know if you could see when I was milling in this one, there was some berries hopping out of the top. I was trying to keep an eye on it so we could time it. But that is one variable compared to something like the NutriMill Harvest Mill. You're gonna have the berries in the top of here, and then the separate canister down at the bottom. So again, this one has a dial that has 3 settings. Obviously you could probably kind of go somewhere in the middle. I've never really had a recipe that I needed to be just that concise. You know, if I do cookies, I mill it on pastry, and if I do different breads, depending on the grain, I will fluctuate between pastry and bread. The coarse, I like a little more chew in my bread, but not everybody likes that, especially when they're transitioning from store-bought flour to fresh milled flour. So I usually stick between the pastry and the bread flour. Again, a lot of that's just personal preference, but I'll show you here in a minute an exact comparison of what a fine flour is on each mill and what a coarse flour is on each mill. Okay, so just like the NutriMill Classic, when you're putting the bowl in there, this one you want to make sure first it's got the cup just like the NutriMill Classic that you can take off and dump into your flour every time. It's got your filter. You want to make sure this lid is on good. You will make a huge mess. Then you'll slide this right in here. Again, make sure that's in there really good. You know, I guess some of the benefit of having 2 parts is that you could store it separate, you could store it together, you could stack it, you know, whatever your space allows for. If this setup would be best for your space, you can kind of see they do come apart, they're stackable, whatever works, whatever your needs are, that might be beneficial for you. Okay, so we're gonna do pastry flour, so the finest flour, so that we can get the best comparison on our time. Okay, so again, turn the mill on first, then I'm gonna pour a cup in and we're gonna set our timer and then we're gonna temp it. So I'm sure it's hard to tell on video, but I do feel like whenever we tested, we had a little decibel meter tester, they were very comparable. They're pretty loud. I definitely hide mine in a back closet whenever I'm milling at 6 o'clock in the morning and everyone's still asleep. It's far from quiet, but you know, that's whenever it's milling grains, that's just part of it, I think. So I think it was right at about 26 seconds. I know I started it a little bit after I started milling. So even so, it's less than half the time of the NutriMill Classic. So then we're gonna pull this off really quick and try to get a good temp on it. Again, I just shake that out. You can use a pastry brush to, this is showing right at 101. Again, 97, 100. I usually run right at 100 whenever I'm milling my grains. I only mill the top of my hopper. I do not overfill this each time, if that makes sense. So I fill to the top of this, I let it mill. It could mill more based on this canister, but I never overfill the top just based on temperature, trying to keep it right at or under 100 degrees. So just something to consider. Just because this holds more, I try to not overfill this top hopper in order to keep my temperature and to give it a break between each mill. So the same with both the NutriMill Classic and the WonderMill. I do not wash this with soap and water between every single mill, or even if you're keeping this dry and cleaned out, brushed out with your pastry brush, I do wash it periodically, but for the most part, you're just using the dry flour, just like a canister. You don't wash your canister, frequently. That's the same concept, I believe. It's very easy to wash though when you do. This the little cup on the inside, again, there's not much in it. It doesn't have much to collect. It does keep most everything down in there. Again, the same with the little sponge filter. Take those out. I run them through the air compressor and clean those out really well. Try not to get those wet. Okay, the final mill that we're gonna try is the NutriMill Harvest Mill. The first thing I notice on this style of mills is they're very compact and they're very pretty. I think that, this looks much better on the counter than something bigger and bulkier, but, while they're aesthetically appealing, the reason I personally went with the WonderMill was the ability to do a large volume, and it's just a workhorse. I mean, I feel like these are both really great at producing large volumes of fresh milled flour, and keeping your temperature down. So if you are just doing bread for your small family, or you're doing pancake mixes, you're milling small amounts of flour at a time, or if you want a wider range of grind, the mill itself, this definitely can produce a more coarse mill. So again, there's give and take with each mill. This one I think is about 7 inches wide and 13 inches tall. So you can tell it's quite a bit smaller, more compact. It also puts, it does not have a canister, an enclosed catcher. It's going to just put your flour directly into whatever bowl you put underneath it. So again, it's more compact in that regard, and whatever size bowl you want to catch it in, it is up to you, and that will affect how much space this takes up on your counter. So, okay, again, the WonderMill is the mill that I own, so I'm most familiar with that one, but I'll go over this one. Again, it's a stone mill. So it's different than the impact mills. You can see, if you take the hopper off at the top, you can see your stones down there. Again, do not get any of these components wet. You want to keep everything nice and dry when you're cleaning, using, air towels, pastry brush is how you're going to want to keep everything clean. This dial on the top is how you adjust the coarseness or fineness of your flour. So let's see, when you turn it clockwise, it's going to give you a finer flour, and counterclockwise is going to be a little bit more coarse. This one can do almost it can do a cracked wheat at its coarsest. So I'll show you that here in just a minute. And its finest flour is very fine. It does have a smaller hopper, and we'll see how the temperature fluctuates based on the amount. But let's go ahead and do a cup just like the. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this one on. You can hear the stones. That's when it's the loudest, but this one is definitely quieter, even with the stones like that. So I'm gonna turn it pretty fine, and get us our finest mill. Okay, so we're right at about 2 minutes on the 1 cup on the NutriMill Harvest. Let's go ahead and temp that. We're showing it to be about 115 degrees, 112 degrees. So it does get it a little bit warmer than the other two. I do feel like it's quite a bit slower. Obviously, it's the WonderMill was right at about 30 seconds. So, you know, again, there's give and take with all of these. This was only 1 cup. So if you're wanting to mill, I know that a lot of my loaves are 3 to 4 cups per loaf. So that's quite a bit of time whenever I'm milling in large quantities. But if I'm making pancakes for my family, I've got an extra 1.5 minutes for sure, or 2 minutes to mill some fresh flour and get all of the benefits of that. So I do think that there's a lot of benefits of the WonderMill. I think that, of the NutriMill Harvest. I think that it's very, very pretty. I like that it's this compact and that it just goes straight into the bowl. I definitely think there's some benefits all around. I really like the way this one is if I was not having to produce a large volume. I think that it would, I definitely think it would take a while to mill the amount of flour that I use every day for baking. So now I'm gonna show you a little bit of the different textures and the coarseness of the flour. Okay, so I milled with each of the mills. I did, this is the NutriMill Classic. This is the WonderMill that I have. And then this is the NutriMill Harvest Mill. So I'm gonna start with the Harvest Mill. This is on the coarsest setting. So as you can see, it is like flaked wheat. It is very coarse. It is the only one that is able to mill that coarsely. Again, I use for cracked wheat and stuff for different recipes. When I'm doing like cream of wheat, I was trying to think of different things, like when I'm doing cornbread and I need a coarse mill, or I want something more coarse, I do some different sorghum recipes, but I use my Vitamix at that point because my WonderMill does not mill that coarsely. So again, here is the most coarse setting on the NutriMill Harvest. This is about a mid-range setting right here. So there's definitely still some pretty good size chunks. And then this is the finest flour. So I know everybody's gonna kind of want to see just how fine that finest mill is. And I've watched some different videos, and there's definitely a learning curve with any mill, but specifically with the NutriMill. I know that when I was milling, you could see that I was kind of trying to continue to turn it clockwise as it was milling, because those stones kind of shake a little bit. The vibrations do tend to turn that dial. That may just be over time that might get a little bit looser. I'm not as familiar with that one again, but that it does. It feels to me like the finest grind. So it's got the coarsest and the finest mill out of all of them. As you can see on the NutriMill Classic and the WonderMill, there is not a drastic difference between the 3 settings. So the finest mill on the WonderMill, it definitely is still a little bit coarse. And then on the NutriMill Classic, you can see on that Harvest Mill, it is a very fine flour. And the NutriMill Classic and the WonderMill both are still pretty coarse. Again, I like some chew to my bread. I like there to be a little bit of texture. I think that the fresh milled wheat is very hearty tasting, and I think that I like the flavor of it and I like the texture of it. I think that if you were doing really fine, doing like pastry doughs and things, this is going to be the only mill that is going to get your flour extremely fine, is that stone mill. I know it's hard to see in a video and in a picture, not in person. Okay, so in summary, I think that I would probably choose the WonderMill again for my personal needs, just based on kind of what I've seen. Again, I think that purchasing a mill is such an individual decision based on your needs, based on the volume you're going to produce and what you're going to be using the wheat for. I think any of these are great mills, and they're going to be a really wise investment in your health and in your kitchen equipment. One other factor again that I took into consideration whenever purchasing a mill is cost. Obviously, the NutriMill Harvest Mill is going to be the most expensive mill. It as of right now, end of 2024, you're looking at $430 to $450, depending on where you purchase it. And then the WonderMill and the NutriMill Classic are pretty comparable in price. The NutriMill Classic is just slightly more, but again, it can also produce. It does have a larger capacity hopper and canister. So, again, purchasing a mill is going to be a very individual purchase based on what your needs are for it. But I highly encourage anybody that is wanting to do it, just try it. There is a huge learning curve in baking with fresh milled flour, but it has changed our family's health. It's changed a lot of things about how we cook and what we cook. It's helped some of the people that I bake for. It's helped with a lot of their gluten sensitivities and digestive issues that they were experiencing. And I really think that you'll really enjoy it once you get past the learning curve. And there's a ton of people out there that have blogs and websites and YouTube channels that you can follow and really learn from their mistakes, learn from each other. There's a lot of great groups. So I hope this was helpful for somebody, and I hope that you purchase a grain mill.